What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a fun one. I was recently on the Overwatch League app looking for articles to read when I came across one where all of the Overwatch League broadcasters made their season predictions for this year. And let me tell you, some people made some very interesting and bold predictions. So why not react to all of them so I can tell you guys what I think? And feel free to join me in the comments below by giving your own reactions to some of these predictions. Alright. Now let's get straight into things, shall we? So first up, we have our main man, Puckett, and he's picked the Vancouver Titans to win the Pacific Division and the NYXL to win the Atlantic. I don't have a problem with either of these picks, and that's mostly because both teams have been hyped up a lot, and for pretty good reason. They're both looking really stacked. Looking at his Final Four prediction, he has a very generic and boring answer. As you can see, he decided to go with 4 potential Korean powerhouses. This is a pretty safe prediction to have, and it could definitely end up happening if you ask me. His champion pick is also pretty safe, being the NYXL, who's one of the strongest teams, so that makes a lot of sense. He also believes that Jonak will win MVP for a second year in a row, and while I really hope he's wrong about this because that would be really boring, there's a good chance his prediction comes true here. And lastly, Puckett's Rookie of the Year is Decay, and I don't have a problem with this. Decay is on my list of potential Rookie of the Year players too, and also Puckett's breakout team, if you were wondering, is the Vancouver Titans, which makes sense since he has them in his Final Four and all. Moving on to everyone's favorite Australian caster, Uber. He has a very realistic Pacific and Atlantic champion prediction, so I don't really think it's necessary to talk about them much because it's pretty obvious why they're there. Instead, I'd like to take a look at his Final Four predictions because he has the Hongju Spark in there. I know that the Spark are looking like a solid team and all, but a Final Four appearance might be a little too optimistic if you ask me. And I'm in no way doubting the ability of this team. I think they're pretty good. I just simply think that there are a handful of better teams out there. And just like with Puckett, Uber also has picked the NYXL to win the championship, but his MVP pick is going to be Libero, and I find this to be a very bold prediction. Libero may be a very skilled flex DPS player, but I think a few of his teammates would have to play below expectations this year if Libero even wants to have any sort of hope of winning this award. Uber's Rookie of the Year pick is Erster, and I personally really like this prediction. Erster was a dominant force during the time he spent in Contenders, and there's a chance that he carries this over into the Overwatch League. And Uber's breakout team is going to be the Spark, and that's not a surprise since he has them in his Final Four and all. Up next is Hexagrams, and he has some very bold predictions for this season. For one, he has the Spark winning the Pacific Division. The other crazy thing that he has going on here is in his Final Four. He honestly believes that the Guangzhou Charge are going to make it there. Don't get me wrong, I think the Charge are a dark horse team to qualify for the playoffs. However, if they do end up making the playoffs, I don't think it's likely they get by the first round. So far, this is the most wacky prediction we've had. He also has Mano winning the MVP, and while I think Mano is one of the best players at his position, he'd have to play out of his mind for the entire year and have his teammate Jonak underperform if he wanted to even have a chance at winning the MVP award. His Rookie of the Year is Godsby, and I really don't have much of an issue with this. Godsby's a solid player who's gotten a lot of praise from his fans and from his teammates, and because he has the Charge making it into the Final Four, Hexagrams naturally has them as his breakout team. I don't really agree with this, but it's a very bold prediction. I will give him that much. Up next is Achille. I apologize if I just butchered his name, but he too has the Titans winning the Pacific Division just like with Puckett, and he's also the first person on here to pick a team other than the NYXL to win the Atlantic Division and to win the Grand Finals. His Final Four is looking really solid, and it's one I actually wouldn't mind seeing come true at all. And one thing that's very interesting here is that it's clear he is not thinking very highly of the NYXL, and he must see them choking the first round of the playoffs or something, which is really weird because everyone else in this article, you'll notice, thinks very highly of the NYXL. But anyway, moving on to his MVP pick, it's a little bit on the questionable side. Gushue is a very talented player, don't get me wrong. The problem is that it's really unclear if he's going to get a lot of time on stage. He's a Chinese player on a team basically full of all South Koreans, so I don't know if the Spark are going to want to put their 100% clean comms at risk. So as of right now, I'd say it's very uncertain if Gushue actually deserves to win any sort of award at all, let alone the MVP. His Rookie of the Year prediction is also a little weird to me because he has Guard, and don't get me wrong, I think Guard is a good player who very well could end up winning this award, but it's very strange to have Gushue, who's also a rookie, play at an MVP level, win the MVP award, and not also get Rookie of the Year. Why would you not just give him Rookie of the Year too? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And by the way, his breakout team for this year is going to be the Spark, just like with Uber. As for Bren, he's yet another person who thinks the NYXL will not win the Atlantic Division or the Grand Finals. Just like with the previous person, he believes that London's going to win both of these, which makes sense if you ask me. They're the current kings of the Overwatch League, and they're looking to have yet another strong season. But what's super interesting about Brent's predictions is how highly he's rating the San Francisco Shock. He has them winning their division and making it into the Final Four. I think these are realistic achievements for this team, but I personally don't think they'll accomplish either of these feats. As for Brent's MVP, he has Gesture, and I think that's a good one. Gesture is an absurdly good player who could very well end up winning this award. His Rookie of the Year pick is Gushue, and you guys already know my feelings on this guy winning any sort of award this year. He's really good, but we don't know how much time he's actually going to get on stage, let alone how well he's going to end up performing against all Overwatch League caliber players. And his breakout team is going to be the Shanghai Dragons, which is something I can get behind. The team made a crazy amount of upgrades during the offseason and are looking to be pretty solid. Up next is Doa, and he easily has the most bold predictions in this entire article, and it's not even close in my opinion. Not only does he have the Guangzhou Charge winning the Pacific Division and making the Final Four, but he also has the Florida Mayhem of all teams making the Final Four as well. I honestly have no idea why anyone in their god right mind would make such a claim. The Mayhem would have to be extremely lucky just to qualify for the play-in tournament, let alone the overall playoffs. So his championship team is the NYXL, no surprise there I guess. His MVP is another interesting pick because he decided to go with Flower. I think Flower will do a great job this year, but winning the MVP award may be pushing it a little bit too much. Now that he's surrounded by good pieces, however, I expect Flower to get back on track and be that same dominant player we saw in 2017, but I don't think he's going to win the MVP. Doa actually decided not to predict the Rookie of the Year award because the choice is apparently too difficult for him, and this just seems dumb if you ask me. You literally just said that Flower is going to win the MVP, and if he plays at that type of level, why on earth would you not give him the Rookie of the Year as well? That just makes no sense. And to make things worse, he has the Florida Mayhem as his breakout team, and he gave an absolutely ridiculous reason as to why he thinks this way, so clearly he wasn't taking this whole prediction thing all too seriously, and if he was, oh Lord help us all. Now it's time for good old Monte Cristo, and as expected, he doesn't have anything too crazy or out of the ordinary with his predictions for the most part. He has the Shock and the NYXL winning their divisions, and his Final Four is looking pretty good as well. London, New York, LA Gladiators, and San Francisco, that's a pretty reasonable prediction. I think he's rating the Shock a little bit too highly. You guys already know how I feel about that. But other than that, I like those predictions. And like with a lot of people, he too is picking the NYXL as his 2019 champions. His MVP for this year is Prophet, and while I think it's reasonable to have a superstar level like him here, I personally don't think it's likely that he's going to win it. I feel like Prophet is one of those guys who doesn't go all out during the regular season. He still tries and is really good, but am I the only one who thinks he waits until the playoffs to go all out completely? I just feel like Prophet is the type of person who doesn't like to go nuts in every single regular season game he plays in, so he can save it for the games that matter the most. Monty's Rookie of the Year pick is Bazzi from the Hangzhou Spark, and basically, Monty explains that he believes his versatility as a flex DPS player is going to help push his team into playoff contention, and I'd say this isn't a bad pick, but it's worth noting that Monty doesn't have a lot of confidence in his Rookie of the Year pick because he believes it's very difficult to predict who's going to win this award, and I'll give him that. There are a lot of new players this year, and it could be super difficult to decide who has the most impact on their team's ability to win games. And finally, his breakout team is the Shanghai Dragons like with Bren. Overall, Monty had some pretty safe predictions here, but I'd honestly expect nothing less from somebody like him. Up next is one of my personal favorite casters, Mr. X, and he is yet another person who has very high regards for the Spark. He doesn't just have them in his Final Four, but he also has them winning the Pacific Division. His Final Four is looking pretty interesting in general though, because he has two teams that we would expect to be there, and two that have a lot to prove if they want to make it that far. Mr. X also thinks the NYXL are going to win it all this year, like with most people in this article. Mr. X also decided to go with a safe pick for his MVP by selecting Jonek. No surprise there. I'd say that most people would go with that pick if they really don't know who to go with. His Rookie of the Year candidate is Roar, which I absolutely love by the way, because I personally think that Roar will be one of the front runners to win this award, so it's cool to see that Mr. X is thinking the same way as I am here. His breakout team is going to be the Dragons, which I'm a little surprised about. It's a good pick, don't get me wrong, but considering the fact that he has the Spark winning the Pacific Division and making the Final Four, it seems a little strange that he wouldn't have them as his breakout team, but Shanghai's still a good pick, so I really don't have much of a problem here. Semler is another caster who thinks very highly of the Spark. Everything else he has is pretty basic though. The The Fusion, the Spitfire, and the NYXL in the Final Four, with New York winning the Grand Finals. That's pretty basic. I'm sure a lot of people have the same type of prediction. His MVP pick is very interesting, though, because he decided to go with Dufran, and that's a really bold prediction to have here. I know the man has some of the best aim we've ever seen, but he hasn't played professionally in over a year. I think Dufran could end up doing great, but if he were to win an award, I think Rookie of the Year would be more of a realistic thing for him to receive. And speaking of the Rookie of the Year, Semler picked Haxel, which is not a bad choice at all. Haxel is a beastly player who is sure to dominate right from the start. But if Dufran is going to win MVP, why wouldn't he also get Rookie of the Year? I just don't understand why all of these guys are doing this. If a rookie plays at an MVP level, he should pretty much be guaranteed Rookie of the Year too, don't you think? I just don't get it. Semler also has the Dragons as his breakout team, like with a lot of the other people here. Now let's talk about Sideshow, and I like some of his predictions a lot. His division winners, Final Four teams, and league champion are all very realistic picks. Now obviously, kind of like with Monty, I think he's rating the Shock just a little bit too highly, but it's okay to have them here because after all, most people see them as a really good team, so it makes sense, right? His MVP pick is where I start to disagree with him though. Bedosian seems like a long shot to win this award. Bedosian's one of the best flex support players in the league, don't get me wrong, but he's going to have to look better than Jonek if he hopes to even have a chance of receiving this accolade. I mean, even Sideshow himself said that it's a long shot because he basically admits that Prophet and Gesture are better players, so they'll both have to have an off year for Bedosian to win it. His Rookie of the Year is Violet, and that's not a bad pick. Violet's a really good flex support player with a good amount of potential. The only issue is that we really don't know how much time Violet's going to get on stage. Even if he is the starter, I still expect him to end up sharing some stage time with Sleepy. And if that's the case, I think it could be a bit harder for him to prove his worth compared to some of the other rookies who are going to be on stage almost all the time. Sideshow's breakout team is the San Francisco Shock. No surprise there. This isn't a bad pick when considering how stacked the Shock are looking at the moment. Now it's time for the predictions of everyone's favorite girl, Zoe. I'm liking Zoe's divisional winners a lot. Gladiators and NYXL is pretty realistic. Her Final Four is also looking okay. If she had a team like the Fusion in there instead of the Spark, then it would be perfect in my opinion. Her Grand Finals champs are the same old boring NYXL that we've already seen a million times, and her MVP is Jonek, and she really has no doubts about this guy winning the award apparently, because he's already proved himself, he's already won it once, so why couldn't he do it again? Makes sense to me. She actually couldn't make up her mind for Rookie of the Year, so she's picking Diem or Gouchwei. Both of these guys definitely have a chance of winning the award for sure. You guys already know how I feel about Gouchwei, so other than that, I really have no complaints. Diem seems like a guy with so much potential, and he could really be a threat this year. So his breakout team is going to be the Shock, and she basically sees them this way for the same reason as I do. The team added an absurd amount of strong talent and are looking to be very, very loaded. Next up is Wolf, and he's another person who has strong faith in the Titans, Spark, and the Spitfire, as you can see here on the screen. His MVP is Bumper from the Vancouver Titans, and while I do think this is a little bit of a bold prediction, I can respect it a lot. Bumper was a solid tank player on Runaway, and there's a good chance he'll be one of the best main tanks coming into this year. His Rookie of the Year is Dufran, and you guys already know what I'm about to say. How the heck can you give a rookie player the MVP award, but not give him Rookie of the Year too? That just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, he basically gave Dufran this award because he's a fan favorite, and while I don't love this, I can understand it because these awards are partially a popularity contest since the fans vote for who they want. And finally, his breakout team is going to be the Spark, and he gives a brief but to the point explanation for why by saying the roster consists of some of the strongest tier 2 talent as well as some of the best players from the most recent World Cup, which is pretty true if you ask me. And last but certainly not least, I have to talk about my man Malik, and he apparently is very high on the Seoul Dynasty by having them as the winners of the Pacific Division and a team that makes it into the Final Four. His Atlantic champs are the NYXL, not much of a surprise there. Basically everyone else has that too. Malik, strangely enough though, doesn't have a pick for the winner of the 2019 season, the MVP award, or the Rookie of the Year. The only other prediction he has on here is his breakout team, which is the Atlanta Reign. Malik has a bold prediction here if you ask me. Most people see Atlanta as a middle of the pack team, but Malik sees them as a sleeper pick. He even mentions that the Reign remind him a lot of the Fusion. He says this because they're a very diverse player roster with all sorts of different nationalities in it, and every player has a lot of potential and skill as well. And that's all of them. There's two things that I learned from reading this article. One is that a lot of broadcasters are extremely high in the Hangzhou Spark. I was surprised to see so many people have them make the Final Four and even win the Pacific Division. While I personally think they all might be slightly overrating them, it's cool to know that an expansion team other than the Titans is receiving this level of hype. The other thing I learned is that everyone sees the NYXL and the London Spitfire as the front runners to win the title this year. There wasn't a single person on here who picked a team other than one of those two to win the championship. I'm kind of hoping that someone else wins the finals, so then we can just laugh at all of them for picking the wrong team. And that pretty much wraps everything up here, ladies and gentlemen. I actually had a ton of fun reading through these and reacting to them. I'm a pretty big fan of the way they set this up, and I might actually make a prediction video of my own that follows this setup because I feel like it would be a lot of fun. If you'd be interested in seeing me make a prediction video in this type of setup, then be sure to let me know down in the comment section. Also, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed, and consider subscribing if you're new so you don't miss out on my next video. And before I end things off, I wanted to apologize for not uploading for a few days. I'm a full-time college student like with dividing by zero, so uploading as much as I want to can be a challenge at times. I'll try my best to increase the level of consistency, and I thank you all for your understanding. Thanks so much for watching today's video, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.